Hey, y'all, it's Mandy. Before we dive into this week's episode, I just want to take a moment and thank my patrons and premium subscribers who have been here partnering with me to create this work. I love doing this with a team. So if you are interested in being someone who creates this resourcing for people who live in care deserts or who just don't have a safe community to discuss grief, check out the show notes to become a patron of the show. You'll get access to monthly bonus episodes as well as our live chat over on Discord. And I would love to hear from you. Okay, that's all I had to say. Now let's get into this week's episode. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 82, titled What It's Like to Feel Joyful Again. Hello and welcome back. This week on the show, we are going to fly through the basics of a quick somatic exercise. If you're unfamiliar with the idea of a somatic practice or exercise, it just means we are going to engage the body instead of relying solely on the mind as our primary way of moving through grief. Somatic embodiment is powerful, and if you listened to last week's episode with Greg Whiting, you'll understand why. If you haven't, go back at some point and listen to his work. It's a great primer on the concept. So today we are going to practice creating an emotional anchor in our lives with the help of our physical body. That way, when disruptive emotions occur, we can disrupt them right back. Just a quick reminder before we get too far into this, that this, as all things we learn on this podcast, is a practice. It will never be something perfect, and it may not be something that works well for you. However, until you give it a shot, you will never know. And the reason we want to create an emotional anchor is because in grief work, our body is going to respond in a way that can be really activating to our sympathetic nervous system. Those big emotions we experience can send us into fight, flight, flee, or freeze responses that will keep us safe if there's a real threat, or can keep us feeling trapped or stuck when the threat is perceived or only remembered in our body from a past experience. In order to benefit from this work, you will have to be willing to become curious about those big emotional responses to the situations you experience in life. And I'm not talking about tantrums and explosions. I mean that feeling where your throat closes up because you're so angry you can't think of the words to say, or on the other side, when you're so angry that every angry word floods from your mouth before you can think, causing even more damage in the situation. Creating emotional anchors allow us to take responsibility, but more than that, to become present with the truth of what we have experienced and how it has affected our present day selves. This is a place where we can create compassion for who we have been and who we are becoming without shaming or shoulding all over ourselves to try and create better behavior or reactions. One more note before we get started. This is not a practice designed to help you relive your trauma. I'm a firm believer that you can work through traumatic experiences without activating the cognitive memories of a traumatic event. So, for these purposes, I want you to recognize that recalling an intense emotion or circumstance to test this anchor does not mean we are reliving our trauma for the sake of a podcast. You can do this work with a therapist and they can properly guide you and create safety for you. But for today, let's keep the chill factor mid range, okay? Be gentle. Okay, very good. So, the first thing we're going to do is recall a vivid memory or a time when we had a vivid emotional state. If you're thinking that this is a good practice for meditation time, calmness is an emotion that can be intense, but it's not going to create the anchor that we want to support ourselves through disruptive emotions. So try to do this and remove yourself from that idea that we're meditating, okay? So, for an anchor to work well, we have to choose a positive emotion. Of course, negative emotions are intense and vivid, but this practice is about securing a more hopeful response to the story that we're living. So for me, and you can follow along, I'm going to recall a vivid experience of joy. It doesn't need to be recent, it just needs to be vibrant and meaningful. So with me, think of a time that you experienced great joy. And as you're thinking about this emotional moment of joy, pay attention to what's happening in your body. There's a chance you're not noticing anything in your body, and that's okay too. Nothing is the beginning of something. But there's also a chance that you might be feeling some tingling or maybe some restlessness. Maybe you're feeling a lightness because you are remembering a joyful moment, I want to go and do the same thing again. Or it may be tempting to start noticing other emotions that come along with joy, like regret or lament. For today, you have total permission to ignore those secondary emotions as they rise, because right now, we want our experience of joy to be as heightened and visceral and real as it's ever been. Once that emotional state feels like it's at a peak, I want you to create an anchor through physical touch on your body by creating a movement or a touch that is not common for you but can be easily repeated. So you don't want the action to be something blatant like clapping your hands in front of your face or tapping your hands on top of your head, because that type of behavior will take us out of our intentions and directly into wondering what everyone around us thinks we're doing when we start tapping our head in public. So for me, I'm choosing to touch my thumb to the pad of every finger on my left hand back and forth. It's not something I typically do, so I won't unintentionally do it, and there's no other meanings attached to that movement for me right now. But it's also something subtle enough I can do it without causing too much disruption to the conversation at hand or distracting the people around me. Maybe you can tug on your ear, tap your knees, reach down to your toes. Whatever physical touch is something unique to you and can be repeated when you want to experience this elation and anchor yourself in joy again. Once you have that figured out, I want you to break the state of emotional joy. Stop with the motion and do something completely different. If you want to take your emotional state somewhere different, you can think about a stressful event or think of something that was mildly annoying. But I like to disrupt the behavior by physically getting up and moving myself to another room. Sometimes I'll wash my hands or just run them under cold water. Sometimes I'll jump up and down. Whatever you choose to do, really pull yourself out of this focused, joyful moment and the physical repetition of what you've done. Okay, once you have disrupted it, and you can pause here if you haven't yet and just decided to keep listening, really pause and change your perspective. I'll wait. Okay, I'm done waiting. I want you to now test the anchor. So I'm going to change the subject. And while I'm talking, I want you to randomly engage that unique action you chose to see if you can activate your joyful experience or emotions while I'm talking. Are you ready? Here's the subject change. We're going to talk about math. There is an infinite number of people about to play a game. Each one will receive a black or a white hat on their heads at the same time. Each will be able to see everyone else's hat, but not their own. They cannot communicate in any shape or form once the hats are placed on their heads. No winks, nudges, or smiles. And then, at the sound of a gong, everyone needs to simultaneously announce the color of their own hat at the exact moment and must all be correct. Their challenge is now to devise a strategy before the game begins that will guarantee success once all of the hats are placed. Sorry about the math problem. I find that most of the time, math is a great way to move our brains away from the emotional state we're in, although there are rare exceptions. I do seem to know a lot of math teachers, and they get really joyful when I talk about problems like this, but I digress. How about you? Were you able to experience a sense of rising joy, or did you feel nothing? Were you distracted by the questions I was forming in that math problem, trying to solve it before I was done talking? Whether or not you were able to experience a sense of joy rising with this first attempt is irrelevant, because repetition and practice are what create strong anchors. So, using this strategy, start practicing your anchor during TV shows, movies, sporting events, or even another person telling you a story. Maybe you're alone and your own thoughts are leaning toward melancholy or regret. This is a moment to introduce your anchor and see if you can recall that sense of joy a little more easily than before. You can test yourself even by introducing the anchor when you're already feeling positively and see if more joy arises. Because this isn't meant to be a magical switch. This is a physical anchor, a partnership with your body to remind your emotional and cognitive parts that they are not laboring for your wellness on their own. Thank you for listening to episode 82 of Restorative Grief. If you listened to this whole thing and you hated it, no problem. All techniques are not going to work for all people. But simply listening or trying something new is a huge deal for those of us who have felt very stuck in our grief work. And the act of giving yourself permission to try something out of the ordinary means you might not be as stuck as you think. I also want to say it's perfectly normal to experience tension with a practice like this. You may be internally battling with the idea of practicing joy when you've been grieving for so long and with such intention. But remember, two things can be true. You can be joyful and still carry your grief story. You can be grieving and experience joy without dishonoring your path. So please give yourself a chance. If this is your first time joining us on the show, thank you so much for making space. It is my great joy and passion in life to create grief literacy and space for other humans to find what means the most to them and find a pathway toward it. You can learn more about my work at mandykpart.com, where you'll find links to join our Patreon, become a premium podcast subscriber, or even learn about one-on-one coaching if you're interested in going deeper. The links to my site, my book, and my free private coaching group are all in the show notes, so please take a moment to check those out and, of course, leave a review. I love hearing how this work shows up for you all. And as always, one last thing before we go. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.